Shavua Tov, welcome to our weekly weekly class on Mesilas Yesharim, the path of the just, the Ramchal's steps in becoming a good Jew in service of Hashem, growing in spirituality, and focusing on spiritual efforts and endeavors in our lives. We're on chapter 11. We use the Art Scroll elucidated version. We're on page 207, if you have that. And right now we're going through different mitzvahs, different commandments, to learn about nikius, spiritual cleanliness. Spiritual cleanliness means in every area of our service of God to be clean from any aspect of impropriety and any non-fulfillment of the duties that we have to fulfill. And so the Ramchal is going through different mitzvahs where people could use some chizuk and to understand the aspects and the details of the commandments, so that we can better serve Hashem. And right now we're discussing the mitzvah in general of v'ahavta l'orecha kamocha, of loving our fellow as ourselves, how important it is to care about other people. And that's not just a general, feel-good phrase, the golden rule, love your fellow as yourself, but that includes a lot of very specific details. So now we are in the middle of learning those different mitzvahs and those different details that apply in the realm of interpersonal relationships. So Let's get started. Page 207. Be'inyan nesinas ha'etza, giving somebody advice. Did you know that there are laws about giving somebody advice? There are. We have to be so careful in how we treat others and to care about somebody else's feelings that even applies when we give someone advice. Be'inyan nesinas ha'etza, shaninu b'toras kohanim, we learned in the Medrash. V'lifnei iver lo titem, we learned in Vayikra, in the Torah, in Leviticus 19:14, it says, "V'lifnei iver lo titein michshol." In front of a blind person, you shall not place a stumbling block. Lifnei suma b'davar means someone who is blind in the matter. What does this mean? Amalecha bas ploni mahi l'kuhuna. Let's say someone asks you, this young lady, is she allowed to marry a kohen? Now, certain people, there are marriage laws in Judaism. Certain people are not permitted to marry different people. And a kohen is prohibited to marry a zona or a grusha, a woman who was divorced. So let's say somebody asks you, is this woman allowed to marry a kohen? So was she ever divorced before? Al timer lo kshera v'hi ena el psula. You're not allowed to tell them that, yeah, she's allowed to marry a kohen when she's not permitted. You're not allowed to give advice that will cause somebody to do a sin. That's what it means. Before a blind person, don't place a stumbling block. If someone asks you for advice, do not give them advice that is not proper. Don't tell them, for instance, I think you should sell your field, and I think you should use that money and invest in a donkey. And what you're really doing is you're trying to manipulate him so that you can get the field. Someone asks you for business advice, so you say, this field you have, it's not such a great field. I really think you should be investing in animals, so I think you should sell the field and buy donkeys. And really, the only reason you're telling him to do that is because you want to purchase his field from him. You want the field for yourself, so you have ulterior motives. Shemet timer, now maybe you'll say, no, that's not the reason I gave him advice. I really think, I happen to need a field, that's true. But I think that the best advice is for him to buy a donkey, and that's why I'm telling him. That's why I told him. Meaning that this is something which is in the heart, and it says that you shall fear Hashem. Now, when it says you shall fear Hashem, that means God knows what you're really thinking, right? You wouldn't be able to be convicted in a court because human beings don't know what your intent was. Did you really want to give him good advice to sell his field, or did you really want to get the field for yourself? But the pasuk says, the verse says, "V'yareisam elokecha." You have to be afraid from Hashem, because God knows really what's in your heart. So if you think you're getting one over on somebody, no, I was really giving him good advice. Hashem knows what you really feel, so you can't pull one over on anyone. Whether it's something that you have a vested interest in or something you don't have a vested interest, when someone asks you for advice, you have to give him advice that's beneficial to him, that you have to tell him the truth, and you have to give him clear advice. And the Torah is going The Torah understood the intent of those who trick others. Because it's not dealing with fools. Right? The Torah is not just telling somebody don't give advice which is obviously bad, right? Because people will know that obviously something which is obviously bad to do, the Torah doesn't need to warn people about that. Not to warn people, but the Torah doesn't need to only speak about those people that would give advice which is objectively bad. But the Torah is talking about people that use their wisdom for evil. But rather people who they give people advice and they make it sound like they're really giving them good advice, that they're really doing it for the benefit of the person who's asking, but in the back of their minds they're really being tricky to give this person advice that will help them in the end, help the giver of advice in the end. Al Kain Amru, therefore it says, Shama Eitzi Yafa, maybe he'll say that it's a good advice he's giving, it's something in the heart. That in the end of the day, God knows what the person is, what his intent is. So in the end of the day, Hashem knows. Someone asks you for advice, you're not allowed to give someone advice that's going to benefit you personally. You have to give him advice. What's the best thing for this individual? That's what you have to think, because your priority is that you have to care about your fellow as you care about yourself. You have to love your fellow as you love yourself. So you would want somebody, he's going to say soon, that you would want, if you asked advice, you would want someone to give you advice that's the best for you. So that's what you have to do for him, without any personal negias, any personal issues. And he says, how many people falter in this every day when these types of sins, when they go and they give not so great advice because they love money. People, the desire for money causes a lot of people to do very bad things. And he says, look how many people are nichshol, make mistakes in this sin because of their love of money. Ukfar hisbar godel anshu bekasav, and the Torah already explained their the great punishment that they get, as it says in the verse, Ar mashke iver badarech. Cursed is somebody who messes a blind person up on the way, who messes up his path. So somebody who gives bad advice, the Torah curses that person. So it's very, very bad to give someone bad advice for your own personal advancement. Rather, this is the responsibility of a straight person. Someone asks you advice, you have to give him the advice that you would want to be given, literally. And the only thing that you should be thinking is what will benefit this fellow, with no other intent, no other intentions. However probable or far-fetched it may be. Let's say you're worried that by giving this person certain advice that will benefit him, it's going to hurt you. Then what do you do? Right? Really, the best advice for him is to sell the field, but it's gonna hurt me for some reason. So what do you do then? If you could tell him, and I think the best thing for you is to do this, but really, I want you to know that's going to hurt me. You're allowed to say that, but you have to be honest. You have to say, this is really the best thing for your financial future, but I just have to be honest with you that if you do that, it's going to hurt me. V'im lav, if you can't do that, yistalik min adaber v'lo yatsehu. He says, if not, just don't give him advice at all. Just walk away. You're not allowed to tell him, really the best thing for him is to sell the field, but it's going to hurt you. So you tell him, don't sell the field. You're not allowed to do that. You have two options. Tell him to sell the field, but I just want to let you know, I have to be honest, it's going to hurt me. Or you say, I can't give you advice, I'm sorry, I don't know, and you walk away. However, the end of the day, one is not allowed to give this person advice that is not for his benefit. Except for one scenario. If the person asking you advice wants to do something bad, then you can give him bad advice. Then it's a mitzvah to deceive him. Ve'im ikesh tispatal v'chushi harachi yochiach. It says that with the crooked you should act perversely, and the story of Kushai, the Archite, proves this concept, they say. So what was that? So in David HaMelech, King David, his son Avshalom, rebelled against him. So Hushai, who was one of David HaMelech's men, pretended to be on Avshalom's side, and he told Avshalom that you should attack King David right away. You should wait before you attack King David. Now, that was really bad advice because it gave King David time to escape, and then King David was able to come back and defeat Avshalom. But it's a mitzvah to give bad advice to an evil person. Here, Avshalom was rebelling against his father and the king, so it's a mitzvah to give that type of person, in that situation, bad advice. Okay, so again, we finish with that. That is the mitzvah. It is a mitzvah to give someone good advice, and it's a prohibition to give someone bad advice unless his intent is for evil. Right? Someone asks you where they could buy drugs. Don't tell him, or you should tell him. You should lie to him. Or if someone wants to buy a gun to rob a bank, you should lie to him. But if someone's asking you for advice, for financial advice, you have to give advice how you would want to be given in that situation, and that is a mitzvah. And if there's any personal issues with it, it's going to hurt you by giving him that good advice. You have to be honest and you have to tell him, or you don't give him advice at all. But you do not ever give someone bad advice if it will benefit you. Okay, next. Harchilus v'lashon hara. Tale-bearing and speaking evil. So this is something we have a class a few times a week about. The speaking evil about somebody else and tale-bearing. Speaking evil is you say something negative about somebody. And tale-bearing, rechilos, is when you say to someone, hey, John was talking about you. You go and tell somebody what someone was doing to them behind their back. That is a very serious prohibition. We already know the seriousness of this, and there are many many details. We already mentioned this. The rabbis already mentioned this. That everybody sins with the sin of the dust of lashon hara. V'amru, what is the dust of lashon hara? Hechi dami avak lashon hara. Kigon de'amar. What's the dust of lashon hara? So there's something called lashon hara. That's speaking evil, and then there's the dust of lashon hara, which is a less severe form of that, but nevertheless is prohibited. So what is the dust of lashon hara? Kigon de'amar heichem ishtachach nura elawei planya. Where could you say to somebody, where could you find that the fire is going rather in the house of him, house of this individual? So now that could be interpreted in one of two ways. You say somebody always has the fire going in his house. He always has the oven on, let's say, right? Because that's how they cooked food back then. So it could be interpreted in one of two ways. Either it means the guy is very fat and he's always eating and he's always indulging in physical pleasures. Or it could mean that he's always cooking food for guests and he's doing a lot of mitzvahs by having people over and feeding them. So since it could be interpreted one of two ways, that's avak lashon hara, the dust of lashon hara, of evil speech, since it's a possibility to be interpreted in a negative way. Sheyesaper tovaso lifnei sonav. Another type of avak lashon hara, the dust of lashon hara, is you say something good about somebody in front of his enemy. So you say something in front of his enemy, that's it's good, that's gonna cause his enemy to start speaking negatively about him. So that's a sin to do that because you're causing negative speech to be spoken about somebody. That's avak lashon hara. V'kol keyotzi baza, and everything similar to this. Af al pi shenirim devarim kalim rechaykim min arachilus. Even though they seem like minor things that are far away from tale-bearing, hine be'emes me'avak shalohem, nevertheless they are the dust of them. Klolo shal davar, the general principle is harbe drachim liyetzer. There are many ways that the Yetzer Hara tries to entice us to do evil and to speak lashon hara. Aval kol davar sheyuchol yivalid mimenu nezek o bizayin lechavero bein befanav ben shelo befanav hareze bechlal lashon hara hasanoi mutuav livnei hamakom she'amar lav kol masaper lashon hara ki ilu kofer be'eker ukroksiv melashni b'seiser re'eu oso atzmis. So the general rule is that any speech which could cause damage or cause embarrassment to somebody, whether you speak it in front of him or behind his back, this is lashon hara, which God hates, and it's detestable to him. And it says on that whoever speaks lashon hara is like he is a heretic, and that he rejects the entire Torah. And it says that he who slanders his neighbor in secret, I will cut him down. So again, very, very serious to speak evil about somebody and to or to tale bear, speak rechilas. And those that listen to our Lashon Hara classes and Sefer Chavetz Chaim know how many details are in these halachas and how careful we have to be. We just learned last time that before speaking rechilas, one has to give up his job if it comes between a choice to gossip about somebody or lose one's job. He has to lose his job. And there are a lot of halachas, so if anyone's interested in learning about these laws, please feel free to message me, and I can send you an email of those classes. But okay, so we just learned, we're still in the middle of chapter 11, it's a very long chapter, but we learned some of the mitzvahs, two of the mitzvahs of how we have to treat others in interpersonal relationships. One is the prohibition to not give somebody bad advice, to not put a stumbling block in front of a blind person. And two is the prohibition, which we know is more than just one prohibition. There are almost a couple dozen negative and positive prohibitions that one violates when speaking evil about one another, speaking Lashon Hara or Rechilas. And with that, we should all have a beautiful week and fulfill these mitzvos to the best of our ability and thereby get closer to Hashem. Have a Shavua Tov.